Good evening. Hey, stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, for the real story of Adam and Eve. We're also going to come up with some nice descriptions of the past Anniville parade. We're going to talk about women in science. In particular, tonight's person will be Madame Curie. We're also going to talk about the wall of separation and the Danbury Baptist letters. Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Free Thought Forum, brought to you by the friendly folks at Pennsylvania Nonbelievers. I'm your host for tonight, Doug Diggens, and this is my co-host,
Hey, I'm Jacob.
Tonight, we're going to bring you a little bit about everything like that, but just so it's fresh in your mind, if you remember what we just had on the screen for opening credits, at the end of the opening credits, beside the disclaimer, was a little thing that said, if you ask the wrong questions, you will get answers like 42 or God. For those of you that are not familiar with that, or it's somewhere lingering in the back of your mind, you think, boy, I heard that someplace. Well, if you've ever watched the movie, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, like that, all of a sudden it would spring up in your mind. In that movie, which is kind of a cult classic, it describes, in science fiction, very humorous, tongue-in-cheek, almost British type of humor about the destruction of Earth in order for the powers that be to build an intergalactic highway through this section of space. The story then goes on to talk about how people all over the galaxy really wanted to know the answer to the ultimate question. You know, what is there? Why are we here? What is the meaning of all this? And they built a giant computer almost the size of a whole world in order to calculate the answer. And at the end of 10,000 years, when they finished calculating it, they came back to the computer and said, okay, what is the meaning of it? What is the answer? And the computer just said, the answer is 42. And they said, but and the computer says, well, you know, I couldn't be more specific because you didn't give me really any specific questions. You'd have to be more specific. And hence, they got just a sort of a random number like 42. And we felt that it's the same thing if you, you know, ask questions about the creation of the universe, you are just as likely to get an answer of 42 or God if you don't ask the right questions. But it's a great movie to watch. If you ever want to rent the thing, or you see it on TV, tune in. It's quite humorous. And
yeah, last year in Philadelphia, when we had Seth Andrews give his speech, that was part of the theme of his speech, was about asking the ultimate question, what is it?
Yeah.
And to some degree, it's the question that you weren't allowed to ask while you were in religion. But, and you know, one thing I've learned from studying a bit of philosophy is sometimes the question can actually be more important than the answer. You know, you focus on, well, what's the answer? Well, sometimes it's just figuring out all the different pieces to be able to answer, even try to answer the question, can be more gratifying, be a better journey than actually finding the answer.
Well, in a way, it's almost like Jeopardy. In a way, it's sort of backwards. There were often the answer is the question. So anyway, to go on, we just thought that you'd like that. If you ever do get a chance to watch the movie, please do so. We're going to talk a little bit here about the Anniville Parade. This was, they had this on Sunday, correct? Or was it Saturday?
I think it was on Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday. I'm sorry, I lost track of the days of the thing. And normally it's a quiet parade, and you know, it honors the men in uniform and veterans, and we usually participate in the thing every year, and we've got mixed reactions every year, from downright hate, catcalls, to, you know, no reaction whatsoever, and some people just putting their thumbs up going, yeah, right on, like that. But tonight, just to explain roughly what happened from a gentleman who was there, Jacob.
Yeah. Well, this last parade was a little bit more interesting. We had at least 2 groups run out into the parade to hand us tracts. They were, it said like the Declaration of the Independence on the front, and half of it was trying to convince you that we're a Christian nation, and the other half was telling us how we're all going to burn in hell if we don't believe that. And of course, you know, they cite different pieces of the Declaration of Independence that were really just talking about God in a general sense, and somehow this is supposed to mean we're a Christian nation, which unfortunately, every time there's a court decision that says God can be a generic term, I just want to take a bag full of these religious tracts into the courtroom and set them down and say, that tract says something different. You know, these religious groups actually are arguing something different. But yeah, it was just awkward to have someone in the middle of walk out to me in the middle of the parade to hand me this.
And just in case you're wondering, you know, what they mean by a tract, for those of you who hadn't really heard of it, they're usually the little pamphlets that get handed out to people as they pass by, and they don't really want to take them, but the people just sort of shove them down your throat and into your hand.
Mitch Hedberg had a great joke once. He said, some people hand you a pamphlet as if to say, hey, you throw this away.
That's good, yeah.
I love that guy. Yeah, we also had at least one group, as we were walking by, they all formed up and in unison started saying the Lord's Prayer at us. I don't know what they hope to accomplish, but yes, we had a whole group of people actually just get together and start reciting the Lord's Prayer at us.
Do you think that maybe that they were intimating that you were walking through the valley of the shadow of death?
I don't know. I don't know if they really knew what the point was either. Sometimes I have to wonder too. But it's really kind of funny just to see how confrontational it got. And I always have to laugh at tracts because they're so the tracts they hand, because they're so comical and so just thrown together that you have to wonder how many people are actually converted by these things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I was actually asked to give an argument for atheism, you'd have to sit down a while, because I would have a lot of things to go over. And I know a lot of people have sometimes said that, you know, for someone to give a reason why they're an atheist, I don't know if it's ever truly one reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually a long process.
It's not one universal reason for everyone, you know.
Right, or just most people go through a long. Maybe you have a moment of epiphany, but it's definitely. It's not like people seem to think that these tracts. Well, plus like I said before, the tracts were trying to quote some things from the Declaration of Independence to say it was a Christian nation, and then citing things like, you know, the divine creator saying all men are created equal, which obviously by Christian doctrine doesn't apply to homosexuals.
And originally to slaves.
Right, there was also slaves, and you could bring up a host of issues there, and that's I think what happens when you really don't think through your arguments to their fullest extent. But other than that, it was a beautiful day to do the parade. It was a lot of fun. Otherwise, I mean, I think for every person we had, you know, handing us a tract or reciting a prayer at us, we had probably far more people cheering us on.
Yeah, it should actually be pointed out a little too that when you participate in this parade and you are an onlooker of the parade, there are certain rules and regulations that go on. Number one is that as marchers in the parade are not allowed to go walk into the crowd and start handing them tracts. Also, the planners of the parade and the city police too, they kind of frown upon onlookers coming out to confront people in the parade, although that sometimes get stretched a little bit. But the only thing that we are happy about is that people don't get violent. They're just trying to put these little pieces of paper there that they honestly think is going to change our mind.
Right.
So it's an enjoyable parade. If ever you want to see the other side and you want to see how religious people react to non-religious people, to atheists, agnostics, and what have you, there, you should march in our parade. You know, if you want to wear a rubber nose and a disguise or something and a mask, so people won't recognize you and think that you are an atheist, come walk with us. Walk a mile in our shoes, as they say, or in this case, I think it was 2 miles, and you can see how friendly some people are, and also how hateful speech-wise other people are. So it's a learning experience.
Yeah, well, and you bring up an interesting point, because one time I was wearing an atheist T-shirt out, and somebody just in a casual conversation said, you know, well, when I tell people I'm an atheist, they get really, really mad, and it's not necessarily even just. You know, it's not like he's been confrontational about being an atheist or, you know, tried to tell other people you're wrong. But one of the things that one of the things that Greta Christina said a few times in her book Coming Out Atheist was that it's hard to tell someone you're an atheist without there being an implied "you're wrong" statement.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because I wonder if the religious have that same reaction towards people of other religions. Even though you're still saying each other are wrong, it's still not quite the hostility you see towards atheists.
Well, the Roman Catholics really think that every other religion is wrong except themselves, and of course there's many other religions thinks that the Catholics and everyone else is wrong.
Right.
But it's that they all have one thing that they can hang their hat on. They say, but at least they believe in God.
Right. Actually, there was a video put out talking about religious tolerance, and it was one of those kinds of videos where they're talking about all these people, all these different religions. Like, I think one of the main people in the film was, I think, was supposed to be a Hindu, and they really the whole thing is really out to depict atheists as the bad guys. And it's really, really like how they bring it out now. Atheists are just making fun of everybody while everyone else is being respectful. But I thought the really funny part about the whole video was that it was actually produced by Scientologists.
Yeah.
And obviously fraudulent religion that deserves to be made fun of.
Well, what was it? They said if there is a surefire way to get rich, invent a religion, and I think that they did that with Scientology.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or Mormonism. I mean, that was it. That was invented in a kitchen behind some hung laundry.
What's that?
I said behind some laundry that was hung across a clothesline, so the person actually writing it down couldn't see these supposed gold tablets that Joseph Smith had found.
Yeah. And it's even worse than that. I've been starting to read through David Fitzgerald's book on the Mormons, and there's just so much craziness surrounding it. But even that, for some reason, isn't as bad as being an atheist. You know, some of the really strange things that Mormons or even other more fringe maybe you could call them fringe Christianities. Things like the Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, maybe even the Seventh-day Adventists, are still somehow not as bad as the atheists. And I think that's why there's this hostility there that isn't there for other religions. Yeah, stigmas. And I know that's one of the reasons it took me so long to really come to terms with my own disbelief, was all the stigmas surrounding it. You know, I'm like, you know, I don't think I believe this, but I'm not this person that they always depict atheists to be. And that's part of the reason I'm very much outspoken, very much, you know, I'll go to the parades, go to the tables, is because I want to dispel that stigma and help other people who are struggling with their own doubt, but have been so misled as to what an atheist actually is that they can't come to terms with what they know they believe.
Yeah, one thing that amused me happened years back, but I think it was in a grocery store someplace. But anyway, what I did was that I did something nice for someone. I think they dropped something, some of their groceries, and I went over and I picked the thing up. I put it back, on the shelf for them. Just a couple of things, and this woman turned around to me and she says, "Oh, how very Christian of you. And I wanted to bust a gut laughing and tell her, hey, this was a rotten atheist that just did something nice for you, and you see that all the time.
Right.
You do something nice for someone. You let someone in traffic, you can see that's been waiting for a while, and you say, oh, yeah, thanks, oh, bless you.
Yeah.
And it's totally unfathomable to me why people can't, why people do see a distinction between the believer and the non-believer.
Right, and again, that's really why we do what we do, is to try to overcome all of these stereotypes and all these stigmas.
And we don't do it for the attention. It's done because this is natural in our temperament, our mood, and everything else that's about us. Yes, we, like anyone else, if we get attacked or yelled at or insulted, you're probably going to see a little bit of a negative reaction back.
Right.
But the vitriol that is thrown at atheists when they know that you're an atheist on a daily basis, it's just totally undeserved.
Right.
And even the people. Look at the people that have been elected to our government to run the United States for the last 100 years. Would you call any one of them pure and Jesus-like? Okay, no, the answer. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a phone call. Hello, caller. How can we help? I can't hear the caller.
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, now we can hear you.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
All right, hi. My name is Nick.
Ned?
My name is Nick. I'm a college student.
Yes, sir.
My friends and I just watched this movie called God's Not Dead, if you've ever heard of that.
I've heard of it. I've been meaning to watch it, but it's one of those things that's on the list of things to do, but haven't got round to.
Well, what I wanted to kind of comment on was the movie seemed to depict atheists as all of these nasty people who just cared nothing but for themselves and thought they were just intellectually superior, and it kind of put the country in the sense that Christians seem to be being persecuted while the atheists are the ones that are kind of on the rise and are kind of, the ones who are really controlling things, especially in the academic system. Did you have any, I was just wondering what you would think of that.
Well, I often think, it would be nice if we were in control, but it's hardly the case. Every time an atheist or just say a non-believer walks down the street, they're bombarded with believer rhetoric. All the signs and the churches, and don't forget that no one wants to elect an atheist to any government position. I mean, even though it's supposedly against the law, people just sort of shudder and say, oh, no, we couldn't possibly elect an atheist to this particular office. But they fail to look back at all the good Christians that have really messed up the office in the past.
But one thing I'd like to really say on the subject of the God Is Not Dead film, if you've read any of the more popularized works of Christian apologetics, the hostility they have towards higher education is just revolting. I mean, especially if you've ever read anything by Josh McDowell, because Josh McDowell was worked for Campus Crusade for Christ for many years, and to hear him berating higher education like he did, while also being primarily a minister to college students, I think is very troubling to try to and the way they always depict universities as somehow being very anti-Christian, anti-religion. Being someone who went to college myself, now of course this is just my own personal experience. I'm sure others have been had their own take, but I never saw any sorts of anything anti-Christian at all at any time during my time at Penn State. And even actually, before a couple of my classes, I actually had my professor actually got up and professed his belief in Jesus. Right. So I saw the way they represent higher education as if it's somehow against them is, I think, completely a straw man.
Well, higher education requires that really that you ask questions, and the more that you learn, the more that you feel that you have to ask, and this somewhat infringes upon religious, they'll call religious freedoms of not really encouraging thinking, but rather just accept the religion that is put before you.
Right.
And education is learning something new. If a day goes by that you don't learn at least one new thing, then that is a day wasted, in my opinion.
Right. So the two of you, what are your thoughts on why do you think a lot of Christians in the country feel they're being persecuted?
The only answer I can think of is because they actually believe from Scripture itself that persecution is a good thing. They think that if they're being persecuted, they're in the right. That's what's supposed to happen, and I think that's about the best explanation I can think of. Being as someone who grew up in a church, I know we felt this way all the time. We were pretty much taught this all the time, or taught to be paranoid of everything that was going on in the government, as if it's something that was going to lead to Christian persecution. And I think it's mostly because for especially among the fundamentalist Christians who believe, many of whom believe that the end of times is going to be within their lifetime, and they believe in those end times they will be persecuted. There will be lots of persecution. So anything that could possibly be viewed as persecution, they believe is persecution for that reason.
And also nowadays, non-believers and free thinkers, as they call them, are being they're more in the public's eye now with all the new media that you have. I mean, before it was just books and occasionally a person standing on a street corner, you know, yelling what his thoughts are. But now with the advent of smartphones and internet, I mean, this show literally right now is you can pick it up anywhere in the world. Like that. I imagine some parts of China where you can't, but if you've got the internet, you can watch the show live. And I think the fact that we are becoming more public now, rather than just sitting down and taking the slings and arrows, as it were, of the religious group. People really do see that as threatening to them. But then again, the non-religious people have felt that threatened for centuries too, and persecuted through the church, and that's about the way I feel about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's about all the questions I had. I thank you, gentlemen, for answering them.
You're quite welcome, sir. Call again sometime.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, Caller makes a good point. It's funny how both sides seem to feel that they are persecuted, and I suppose to a certain extent both sides are being persecuted by the other. It's just a verbal exchange back and forth, and it's who is going to get sort of the last word in. And of course, there's never going to be a last word for as long as there are two people left on the face of the planet.
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point, and that is, I think sometimes it's hard for people to have an honest disagreement and discuss it without feeling like they're being personally attacked. And then there's also the issue where in the country we live in right now, things have gotten fairly polarized, it seems, where we have on every issue we have just extremists screaming at each other, it feels like. Rather than people just wanting to engage in a good, honest discussion about it. They feel the need to either they always want to play the victim while portraying the person opposed to them as the oppressor. Now, sometimes that is indeed the case, depending on the circumstance, but I think whatever the circumstance, there's always going to be people on either side wanting to portray themselves in that picture.
Well, also, you do get a certain amount of sympathy if you can claim that you yourself are being persecuted. So, I mean, people always take pity on someone that they perceive as being persecuted. So if you want the pity of other people and you want people to listen to your argument, all you got to do is shout, oh yes, we're being persecuted by the Jews, we're being persecuted by the Christians, we're being persecuted by the atheists. Whatever the other side is that's doing the persecuting, that person that claims that they're being persecuted against will get the sympathy. So naturally, of course, one side is going to accuse the other of persecuting them. The only thing that you can do really for yourself is to add up the numbers. If they're talking about persecution, like with us, all you have to do is count all the Christian billboards and signs and churches and compare that to the number of non-believer signs or buildings of meeting rather than buildings of worship, and you can see how terribly one-sided it is. So,
or even just in the in the tax code, where American Atheists and for the Freedom from Religion Foundation have been trying to fight a lot of the religious exemptions in the tax code. For like they might not have to pay their application fees, which can run $850. They don't have to file all the forms that make them accountable, that declare things like staff salaries. Or they still have the housing allowances where the clergy get tax-free income. And also, like the Mormon Church declares a lot of its property. The Mormon Church is one of the largest landowners in the country. Yet they declare all of their lands as expenses when it really should be income.
Yeah.
They have a lot of businesses. They're really keeping behind their religious.
Well, just about every church is tax exempt for property taxes.
Right. But now American Atheist is fighting it, although they just had one of the lawsuits thrown out, citing lack of standing. And most of the reason is the judge essentially wanted American Atheist to trial to file as a religious group, which is something that American Atheist just refuses to do.
Yeah.
Because if they grant, say, American Atheist and the Freedom from Religion Foundation a religious status, that's going to be very problematic for many reasons. First of all, it will never, pretty much that will mean that nonprofits in general will not be held accountable. Because then you open the door for other organizations and who also will share all these same exemptions and will be able to get away with a lot more because there's less accountability within the religious 501c3s, which is why they don't want to do it. And the American Atheist has been arguing, like, look, we just want to follow the law as it is, and we want everybody else to follow this law. And essentially the judge is saying you have to attempt to break the law in order to be able to sue for it.
You have to make a non-religious church. And we say, but no, that's the whole point of what we believe in. We do not believe in religion being viable.
Well, not necessarily being viable, but just we don't believe religion should have all these special exemptions. And that's what it really comes down to. Is there is a bit of a religious privilege in this country. You know, they are. Not only in the tax codes, but they're having, as we just saw with Greece v. Galloway, they're now allowed to do sectarian prayers before every single town hall meeting. There's a lot of privilege there, and they feel like that just taking away the privilege is somehow persecution.
But by the same token, too, even though they are not supposed to be mentioning Jesus Christ or any other notable, it's supposed to be a generic prayer, there is no punishment for any priest or any clergy to go off and start talking about Jesus our Savior and all the other, and making a strictly a Christian prayer, and that's the whole point. There's no accountability for it.
Right, and it's really, I think, the point that sometimes they'll perceive like the legalization of same-sex marriage as somehow being persecution. Now, if churches were being forced to perform a same-sex wedding, they would have an argument there. But if that's not happening, like just giving people the freedom to do something that the church would normally prohibit is not persecution. And I think that's the main point here, is they feel that the United States law allowing something to be legal that isn't legal under their own code is somehow persecution, even though the church itself is not being forced to partake in it in any way. If it was the church being forced to partake in these issues, then certainly it would be persecution. But just simply giving the freedom that freedom to other people to decide for themselves, that's not persecution.
Well, as they said, to paraphrase, I mean, it neither breaks their leg. What is it? It neither, gosh, I forgot the quote. Either breaks your leg.
What was it again?
It neither picks my pocket or breaks my leg. But they do so. In other words, it does no one else any harm. So what is the problem with gay people wanting to get married? I know you get a million opinions on that, but when you come right down to it, really, what harm does it do anyone else? And don't talk about children. Oh, it's going to harm the children. Like that. Children know more about gay people now and the gay lifestyle than any of their parents ever did or ever will, like that, and they take it totally in stride. You can't force someone to be gay like that, and you can't force someone to be straight. You either are or you are not, and both have the right to live their own life.
Right. When it comes to things like that, it's more or less, if the church doesn't want people to do something like that, I think when it's something like that, it's really on the church to explain, to convince other people of that. It's not the government to convince people they can't do that. That's something like that should be. If the religion doesn't want people to do that, it's up to them to convince the religion itself to convince people not to do that.
Yeah.
And that's what we mean by really what's meant by personal liberty.
Okay. Now for a little bit here about women in science. For centuries, maybe thousands of years, women's contributions to science has been greatly overlooked, and basically men have stepped in and taken all the credit for everything, or what they have done is that they have prevented women from obtaining the information, the education that would be necessary for making scientific discoveries. However, some women have persisted through the centuries and have become outstanding scientists. Tonight's brief foray into women in science is a woman named as Madame Curie, or Marie Curie. She's known for being the first woman scientist in the modern world. Okay, she's basically been given the title the mother of modern physics, pioneer in research about radioactivity, a word that she actually coined. So the next time you hear about something being radioactive, think about Madame Curie. She was the first woman awarded a PhD in research science in Europe, and the first woman professor at the Sorbonne. She's discovered and isolated polonium and radium and the nature of radiation and beta rays. She was a Nobel laureate in 1903 for physics and 1911 in chemistry, and the first woman to be awarded the Nobel Prize, and the first woman to be awarded two different Nobel Prizes for two different scientific disciplines. Okay, now she was also known as Marie, oh boy, I have to read this one, Sladowski or Skowska Curie, Mrs. Pierre Curie. You know, it was the husband's name, Mrs. Pierre Curie. But anyway, Marie Curie, she was born in Warsaw, the youngest of 5 children. Her father was a physics teacher, and her mother died when she was 11 years old, but she was also an educator. After graduating with honors in her early schooling, Marie Curie found herself without options in Poland for higher education because they didn't think that women basically were smart enough to learn in the sciences. She spent some time as a governess in 1891, followed her sister, already a gynecologist, to Paris. In Paris, Marie enrolled in the Sorbonne. Marie graduated in first place in physics. That was in 1893, when on a scholarship returned for a degree in mathematics, which she took second place. Although she's begun with, work as a researcher and was thought of a work that she met Pierre Curie in 1894 when she was 35 years of age, and they were later married in July of 1895. Inspired by work on radioactivity in uranium by Henry Basquel, Marie began research and other she first discovered radioactivity in thorium and then demonstrated that the radioactivity is not a property of interaction between elements, but is an atomic property. Madame Curie was actually back in the times, and even by today's standards, she would considered a fairly good-looking woman, which of course, as many of the women out there will know, that sometimes the prettier you are, the more beautiful you are, the less you are taken seriously. And it was a terrible thing for her that after she actually divorced her first husband, she married another man years later, and who was also previously married. And people would stand outside of her house and they would throw rocks through the window and yell, you know, the husband stealer and everything. And she went into a deep funk, I guess you could say, into a deep depression. And while she was sort of laying at home in this funk of hers, she was notified that she had won her second Nobel Prize. So this, of course, did pick up her spirits. But unfortunately, back in the early days, when we started first working on radium and other radioactive materials, their elements, we did not know the dangers of radioactivity and the damage that it could actually do to the human body. I mean, let's face it, we never really knew what the harm was of radioactivity until you know, the mid-1940s, when we started using nuclear weapons and having nuclear tests, and then we found out it really could kill you. And unfortunately, Marie Curie succumbed to pernicious anemia, which everyone thinks was a result of her work with radium. For the people that are a little bit older in the audience, like me, do you remember they used to have watches with radium dials on the thing? I do. I mean, the expensive watches used to have pieces of radium put in the numbers and the hands on it, and it glowed in the dark without being exposed to light. And that was a wonderful thing. At least so they thought. It was radium. No one thought that it was going to be harmful. Unfortunately, it was, and even though she didn't know the dangers of it, she succumbed to the radiation and died. We'll try to bring you a little bit more of an upbeat story on our next program about women in science, but it would, if you really want to read a good book, there was one out there entitled Women of Science Who Won the Nobel Prize, and give it a read like that. I was going to present something else at this time, but unfortunately time has kind of got away from us a little bit, and wait a minute. Jim, don't. If they're at the back door, don't let them in. Okay, keep the door. God, everywhere you turn, there are Daleks.
What was that all about?
I don't know. I thought I heard Doctor Who beaming in, but I guess not. So, okay, are you safe, Jim? Yes. Okay, good. It was one other thing that I just wanted to quickly speak to you about, and I heard it on the news, and it kind of disturbed me a little bit. And they were talking about the growth lately, especially it's going to be this year, of gypsy mosques. Well, I'll tell you, I didn't even know that gypsies were Muslim. And it kind of bothers me that these gypsies are going to be building mosques all over the United States, and especially here in Pennsylvania. Yes. Oh, it was gypsy moths. Oh, like moths to a flame. Oh. Never mind. Okay, for those of you who remember laughing, you remember that little skit. Just joking. But now we're getting ready to the last few minutes of the show, and I'm going to throw you over to Jacob, who's got some more information for you.
Well, I don't know how to follow that.
I didn't tell him I was doing that.
If anyone is actually still watching this show, and we thank you. Well, actually, I would say one actually better joke that would be even more funny is Ken Ham's latest debate challenge. I don't know if you ever heard anything about that yet.
No.
Yeah, he apparently has issued another debate challenge, even though he pretty much got pretty well handled by Bill Nye. His latest challenge is actually to Pat Robertson.
Oh, beautiful.
Because if you've been following it, Pat Robertson has been saying some things ever since the debate. He's been very much anti-creationist. I mean, right after the debate, he came out and said creationism is nonsense, and has since made some more statements to that effect, and which has really been, of course, been angering Ken Ham. So he wants to debate Pat Robertson, which I think, even if I would actually pay money to see that. I think that would be
Me too.
That would be entertainment, to say the least. But I think it also brings up, going back to, it brings up one thing. What I think, as for people promoting science, we definitely need to get the religious who are pro-science behind us. And I know one of the things I heard leading up to the Nye-Ham debate was some people saying they wish that maybe instead of Bill Nye, it was Kenneth Miller taking on Ken Ham. Mm-hmm. Kenneth Miller, you might remember, was one of the was one of those who testified against intelligent design in Kitzmiller versus Dover, and he's also a Catholic. So that shoots maybe about 3/4 of Ken Ham's arguments. Mm-hmm. His whole argument that evolution is somehow atheist is somehow he's got to know better than that by now. If he makes that claim anymore, even with Pat Robertson against creationism now, there is simply no way he can make that argument anymore.
No.
And you can't claim persecution against Christians by teaching evolution, because actually the majority of Christians now accept evolution.
Yeah.
Or at least it's about, in the United States, it's probably about half and half.
I'd like to see that, right?
Yeah, that would be, I think that would be funnier than any joke you could make up. Well, at least what you could make up. Come on.
All right. Look, I'm a joker. Everyone knows that.
I'm giving you a hard. But as we're wrapping up here, I wanted to get a couple of events coming up. If you want to come out to help out with a tabling event, really help engaging with the public, our next is going to be Historic Anniville Day on June 14th in Anniville from 9 to 2 p.m. Then we're going to be in Jubilee Day in Mechanicsburg on June 19th from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. So if you could come at any point during the day, we obviously could always use help and help maybe set up some shifts to make sure our table is always adequately staffed. Then we got Lancaster Pride Festival on the 21st. And one of the really fun things about the Lancaster Pride Festival is, I think at least last year, hopefully they do this again, is we had a booth right next to the Lancaster Free Thought Society. So help chat with another free thought organization here in Pennsylvania. Well, I think we're the largest and oldest one. We're definitely not the only free thought organization in Pennsylvania. We definitely support the other groups and try to. Always nice to develop our relationships with other groups. But if you just want to, our upcoming meetups are, our Lancaster meetup is the 28th, and then we got a lot of meetings the second week of June, where we have our York meeting on the 7th, Lebanon is on the 11th, Harrisburg is on the 12th, and then Chambersburg will be on the June 17th. And our next Free Thought Forum will be on June 10th. And hopefully we'll be able to get this episode up on YouTube. Unfortunately, the last episode we had an error in recording, and we were unable to repost it, so we will not be able to post that on YouTube. But hopefully we got this one right, and we'll be able to you'll be able to see it again within the next 24 hours. So I think that's about all we have for the night. So thanks for watching. Thanks for the calls. And again, my name is Jacob Zentichko alongside Doug.
Doug, sometimes referred to as Dastardly Doug, but it's Doug Diggens, and glad you could tune in.
All right, we'll see you next time.
Take care.